Hello, how's it going?
Very good. How are you?
I am Manisha, the founder of Modulo. If you haven't heard of us, we are a directory and marketplace for homeschooling resources. And I am here with my good friend and collaborator, Rohan Mahimkar, who is the co-founder and co-CEO of Prodigy Game. And we have been talking about math learning for a long time. And now, with the growth of the homeschooling population, I think Rohan and I have been talking more about homeschooling and how Prodigy is uniquely positioned to serve homeschoolers. And so, we're really excited to have this workshop. You all were really generous in sharing your challenges in teaching math to your kids. And so I'm going to just kind of dive in and share some of what I've learned about homeschooling math. And then Rohan is going to talk a little bit about some of the features in Prodigy that you can use to support your child in learning math. And you're just going to have a lot of time for Q&A. So without further ado, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my background and how I discovered Prodigy. I got my start as a tutor in New York City, and my specialty was test prep. So I taught kids all over the city, from the children of some of the wealthiest CEOs in Manhattan to also in struggling public schools. And I was really, really good at getting kids from a 10% on their SAT to a 95% or a 99% on their SAT. And the funny thing about this special skill I had is that I was pretty terrible at taking tests. When I was in middle school and high school, I often underperformed. I had a lot of confusion and friction around the fact that I seemed to be doing really well in school, but just couldn't get my head around these standardized tests. Even in English language arts, which I thought was my strong suit, I would consistently choose the wrong answer in multiple choice questions. And so the reason I'm sharing this is because I think that the reason I was such an excellent tutor is because I actually had a lot of difficulty in this area. And there's a teacher of mine who used to say, we heal where we're wounded. And so if there's anything that you take away from this workshop, I want it to be that you absolutely have the capacity to teach your child math. And in fact, your own challenges in math make you a better teacher than someone who is just naturally gifted at math, because you can empathize more strongly with their challenges and you can learn along with your child. So it's a great gift. So I wanted to just start off by kind of going over some of the techniques I've learned for homeschooling math over the last 5 to 10 years. I've done a deep dive in some of the biggest homeschooling groups and kind of really distilled some of the basic principles that tend to work well for parents overall. And then I wanted to go through some of your specific questions, especially how to teach math if you don't consider yourself good at it. Gifted and advanced math, especially, that kind of goes along with, what if I'm not good at math and my kid is really amazing at math? How does this work together? What if I have two kids and they're learning at different rates? Just how to get your child to love math, because that everything else kind of unfolds when you can get past that low confidence and anxiety. I want to talk about how to get to that point of deep understanding, because a lot of you expressed in your form that, okay, it's great that they can answer questions, but how do I know that they have a real deep understanding, and how do I draw connections in the real world with math? That seemed really important to you, which is a beautiful intention. And then we're going to talk a little bit about learning differences, especially ADHD, autism, dyscalculia, and dyslexia, and how to navigate those when you're teaching math. And then you had some very specific questions, which we'll also address. So here are the main tenets that I have distilled that are effective for homeschooling math. The first is really getting aligned with your child on the purpose of learning math. A lot of our kids say, oh, what's the point of learning math? I don't get it. And we kind of skip over that, like, oh, you have to. But there's something so powerful about having a mission and knowing why you're doing something. Rohan and I both run companies. If we didn't know why we were doing what we were doing, we would not be able to get up in the morning and get all the work done. And so really taking the time to think for yourself, well, what is the purpose of learning math? Is it just to graduate from school? How do I actually apply this in my life? And this is something that you can do together. You can look on Google, you can ask ChatGPT, you can talk about with your child and say, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? Oh, I want to run a dance company. Oh, okay. Well, then you might need to know how to write budgets. And then all of a sudden, your child is really excited to learn math because they want to be able to build a budget for their dance company. That's just one example. Or maybe the entire universe of stars opens up to you when you understand math. Just really taking the time to get aligned with the purpose is so key. Second is, and I just want to say we often really don't give our children enough credit to actually understand the purpose of why they're doing something. And even a very, very young child, like 3 or 4 years old, you can have that conversation about the point of learning math. And you can think about it a little more deeply for yourself as well. So the second thing, and this is what's so great about homeschooling, is that you can choose the ideal time of day to learn math. You don't have to do it when your child is exhausted after a full day of school. You can say, okay, my child is most fresh at 10:32 a.m. when they've had their breakfast and run outside. And you can say, this is going to be my math learning time every day. And then that's also something that you can decide with your child. And you can get your child involved in the schedule and making a commitment to the schedule in service of their purpose of learning math. It's so powerful. And so that period of time could be 10 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, it could be an hour. If your child does have ADHD, it might just be 10 minutes. But the key is that those are 10 focused minutes every day when they're learning consistently. So we have this concept we talk a lot about in homeschooling, which is called mastery hours or power hours, when you choose that math and ELA time where your child is really fresh. And I think a lot of parents think this has to be a long time, but there's even some research done by the Annenberg Institute at Brown that's studying high dosage tutoring that says that for a child in elementary school, there's no point in that being longer than 45 minutes, that focused learning, because after that, their attention fades. So along those lines, I have found the most effective way to help your child learn math is to choose a curriculum that they love. Honestly, I mean, I don't want to make this workshop sound like a big advertisement for Prodigy game, but the reason that I connected with Rohan and I was so excited to work with him and get to know him is because we had so many kids who were coming to us who didn't like math, who had low math confidence. And we would say, okay, well, why don't you try this video game? And then all of a sudden they liked math and they had confidence, and the parents didn't have to be constantly inventing different math problems. It's already set up to be a sequential math program that kids like. And it was interesting when I was reading your responses on the forums, almost all of the responses from people who are really struggling with kids disliking math were not parents who were using Prodigy. They were using some other kind of tool. And so I think it might be Prodigy for your child that your kid loves, and it might be some other program, but finding that thing that they really enjoy playing and is fun for them is going to make a huge, huge difference. And it's worthwhile taking the time to figure that out. Because seriously, I saw a teenage girl who thought she was terrible at math, huge math anxiety. After 1 week of playing Prodigy, she just had a totally different vision of herself in math. Transformed her.
And I'd love if any of the folks in the audience have any feedback on this, just to hear, like, have you heard your children or have you heard yourself say, I'm no good at math. I'm not a math person. I hate math and have really strong feelings about it. That would be helpful to us. And I have certainly heard that when we were starting Prodigy. That is actually one of the big reasons why we had started Prodigy, is to make the process of learning math enjoyable for kids. When I was growing up, the process of practicing and learning math for me was going through worksheets. I still remember the process every week of coming home with a stack that thick of worksheets and having to go through pages and pages of these and absolutely dreading that process.